Okay, so we're just looking at our homework here. I got a little bit different situation. If you'll notice this time, we're actually combining all of the work that we've done for the past week together into one problem. Okay? Anytime you have parentheses with variables, there's only really one good way for us to deal with that. And what property is that? Distributive property. So that really needs to be the first thing that we look at. So I'm going to write down that I'm using my distributive property, and it looks like this. Okay? But what does it mean? Remember, what does it mean to do the distributive property? What are you doing with that negative 3? Okay, that's a great explanation. You multiply that negative 3 times both of these on the inside. So this is what's happening in my head. I do negative 3 times x, and I do negative 3 times 5. Now that happens in my head, and on my paper, I write negative 3x minus 15. Okay? Now over on this side, I have another parenthesis. So how do I deal with that parenthesis? Same way. Okay. I just wanted to recognize it was a different one. So I'm going to have to do 3 times x and 3 times negative 1. So again, remember, this part happens in your head. You do 3 times x, and you do 3 times negative 1. So we're at the point now where this happens in our head. What do I write on my paper? 3 times x is? 3x. And 3 times negative 1? It's negative 3. Okay? So this part in red and in blue happened in our head. We don't normally write that down. But obviously it does get confusing, doesn't it? Sometimes what happens is we get a lot of work written down in front of us and we lose track of what we were doing. At this point, guys, this problem is the only thing I need to worry about at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of everything else I did. Now, I don't want you to erase it. You should not erase this work from your paper. What you should do, though, is get another piece of paper and kind of cover it up. Or get your worksheet and cover it up so that you're only looking at this line. Because now this is the only line that's important to us. So now treat it like a brand new problem. What do? My goal here is to get the two variables together on the same side. So,
you have to add 3x to the other side.
So I agree with you. So I'm going to add 3x to both sides. I forgot to draw my line. Some of us like to have that line drawn. So I'm going to I'm going to add 3x to both sides. And this, again, normally happens in my head. Okay, the actual adding part happens in my head. So I've got negative 3x plus 3x. What happens with that? Okay, it adds up to be 0. So the only thing I'm left with is negative 15. Equals, over here I've got 3x plus 3x. That's 6x minus 3. Slide it down and cover up what you've already done. Okay, that way it's not confusing and that way it's not distracting to you. And now you can focus in just where you're at. Now we have what is the smaller problem. These are actually like last night's problems, right? How do I get the x by itself here? Which one would I get rid of? Okay, I have to get rid of the 3. So the opposite of minus 3 is plus 3. Notice it's on both sides. I added on the right side of the line and I added on the left side of the line. I can clean that up now. I can do this part in my head. Negative 15 plus 3 is negative 12 equals the 6x I didn't do anything with, so it's still there. And the minus 3 plus 3 turns into 0 and goes away. Where's our focus and our attention on this problem? Yeah, on the very bottom line, negative 12 equals 6x. So now I'm trying to find the x. So this is good. Good answer. So I'm going to divide both sides by 6. 6 divided by 6 gives me the 1x that I was looking for. Remember, that is what I'm looking for, is just one single x. And negative 12 divided by 6 is negative 2. And that gets me to my final answer. Number 2 has a unique part to it, so we're going to see what happens with that unique part. Okay? Some of you like to have that nice straight line here. I like to have the nice straight line. It makes me keep my work organized. That's why I draw it. Okay. Anytime you have parentheses and a variable, what's the only way to really deal with that? Okay, good. It's going to be the distributive property. So in my head, I did 2 times 7 and 2 times 3t. That's what's happening in my head. But on paper, I write down 2 times 7 is 14. And 2 times 3t is 6t. Now, here's the spot where some of us get mixed up. We're a little bit unsure of what to do. Remember, I need to have the variables both on the same side. So I need to get my 6t and my negative t together on the same side. They are like terms. But unfortunately, this line blocks me from combining them. I can't combine them until they're together on the same side. So I need to make a decision. Is it easier to move the 6t to the right? Or is it easier to move the negative t to the left? Which way do we want to do that?
To the right.
If we move the 6t to the right, then that's going to put the constant 14 on the left and our variables on the right. And that's just going to make it easier to solve. So how do I move the 6t? How do you do the opposite of add 6t? Subtract. So we're going to subtract 6t from both sides. Now, of course, those two do go away from each other. 6t minus 6t is 0t. So there are no t's left. And that gives me 14 equals. Now, this part right here, negative t minus 6. In my head, I need to do negative 1 minus 6. What is that? Negative 7t, right? Of course, I can use my calculator. And now remember, all of this up here, you need to ignore all of that. You should only be focused on this down here, one at a time. So we're going to focus our attention right down here. How do I get the t by itself? Okay, I'm going to undo the multiplication by doing division. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 7. And that should leave me with my what I hope is my answer here. T equals negative 2. Okay? That. So this is just like the last problem. In our head, we just did 3 times a and 3 times 1. And on our paper, we write 3a plus 3 minus 5 equals 3a minus 2. And again, I keep forgetting about my line here. All right. Now, any ideas as to where to go from here? So hopefully you recognize that these two are like terms, aren't they? So because they're like terms, we can add them together. They're all, both on the same side. So what is 3 minus 5? Negative 2. So I got 3a minus 2 equals 3a minus 2. Well, that's a little strange. Look at that for a second. So I'm going to try to get the variables together. So I'm going to move the 3a here over to here. So I do the inverse of the 3a. That's going to be a subtract 3a and a subtract 3a. Now, of course, what happens in my head? What is 3a subtract 3a? It's 0a, but we never write that down, do we? So negative 2 equals, again, what happens right here? 3a subtract 3a. It's 0a. But again, we never ever write down 0a. If we have 0 a's, then we have no a's. We don't write that down. So we're left with this. Now, how confident are you now that negative 2 is equal to negative 2?
Very.
Very confident. Is this a true statement?
Yes.
Yes, it is. And what I need you to recognize is this. If the variable disappears, and since we are doing this kind of together, treat this as your notes, so write this down. If the variable disappears,